Okay, so I want you to try something for me. Just take a second and look around the room you're in right now. Pick an object. Any object, really. Maybe it's the coffee mug in your hand or the sneakers by the door or even the phone you're using to listen to this.
The basic inventory of modern life.
Exactly. Now, here's the magic trick. That coffee, the beans were probably harvested in Colombia or Ethiopia. The ceramic for the mug might be from China. And your sneakers.
The rubber probably came from a tree in Thailand and then was processed in Indonesia and stitched together in Vietnam.
Right. And your phone, I mean, that's the ultimate traveler. Designed in California, screen from South Korea, camera sensors from Japan, and assembled in Shenzhen.
It really is.
It's mind-boggling when you
Yeah.
actually stop to think about it. We just go about our days thinking we're living these local lives, but we are touching the entire world every single time we get dressed or eat breakfast.
We are living in a world where, quite literally, no nation acts alone. You just cannot opt out. This is the invisible web that holds the modern world together.
And that is exactly what we are unpacking in this deep dive. Today, we're looking at global interdependence and the architecture of world trade. And I know that sounds like the title of a very dry textbook.
It does sound a bit academic.
It does. But stick with me here, because this is actually about the secret operating system of the planet.
It really is. We need to understand the mechanics of this web. Like, why do countries trade in the first place? Why doesn't the U.S. just, make its own T-shirts and grow its own bananas? Why does Japan focus on cars instead of rice?
And we're going to get into the massive organizations, the alphabet soup like the WTO and OPEC, that basically act as the traffic controllers for all this stuff.
But the most critical thing we need to discuss is the cost of this system. And I don't mean the monetary cost, but the risk. We've built a machine designed for pure speed and efficiency, but that efficiency has created a terrifying level of fragility.
It's the classic, don't put all your eggs in one basket problem, but scaled up to the entire planet.
Precisely. So our mission today is to understand that trade-off. We've connected the world to get rich, but in doing so, we've made ourselves vulnerable to everything from a housing crisis in Florida to a pandemic in Wuhan.
So let's crack this open. Let's start with the engine itself. Why do we swap? I mean, on a basic level, I trade my money for a sandwich because I'm hungry and I don't want to bake bread, but for a whole country, why doesn't a massive nation like the U.S. just close the borders and produce everything internally?
Well, they could try. It's called autarky. Total self-sufficiency. But if they did, their economy would likely crash or at least just grind to a halt. To understand why, we have to look at two foundational concepts in geography and economics. The first one is relatively intuitive. It's called complementarity.
Okay, complementarity. Is that just
Yeah.
a fancy way of saying I have something you want?
Pretty much, yeah. But with a specific geographic twist, it's about a resource mismatch. Complementarity happens when one region has a supply of something that another region specifically demands.
So purely based on the luck of the draw, like what you just happen to have in the ground.
Often, yes. Geography is not distributed equally. Some countries are incredibly rich in natural resources: oil, timber, rare earth minerals. Think of Saudi Arabia and oil. Other countries might be resource poor geographically, like Japan or Switzerland, but they have a massive surplus of highly educated knowledge workers or capital.
So country A has the crude oil, and country B has the chemical engineers to turn that oil into plastic.
Exactly. It creates a relationship of mutual benefit. Trade happens here because it has to. One side has the raw material, the other has the processing power. It's the absolute bedrock of trade history. If you live in Canada, you can't grow bananas in your backyard.
No, definitely not.
So if you want a banana, you need Ecuador. That's complementarity.
Okay, that makes sense. I need stuff I physically can't make. But what about when I can make the thing? Like, the U.S. could make cheap plastic toys. We have the plastic. We have the factories. Why do we buy them from overseas?
Now we're getting to the real engine of the global economy. This is the concept that trips people up, but it's the most important one. It's called comparative advantage.
Comparative advantage. I remember hearing this in Econ 101 and getting so confused. How is this different from just being better at making something?
It's not about being better. It's about being efficient regarding what you give up. It's about opportunity cost.
Opportunity cost. Okay, break that down for us.
Imagine you are a brilliant lawyer who charges $500 an hour. You are also an amazingly fast typist, faster than any secretary you could possibly hire. Should you do your own typing?
I mean, if I'm faster, maybe. I save money on hiring someone.
But do you really? Every hour you spend typing is an hour you aren't billing $500 as a lawyer. So even though you are better at typing, your comparative advantage is in law. The opportunity cost of typing is just too high. You're actually losing money by doing the low-value tasks.
Okay, wow, that actually clicks. So how does that apply to a country?
Let's look at a classic example. Japan in the late 20th century. Japan had rebuilt its economy and had a highly skilled workforce. Physically, could Japan have used its land and labor to make cheap textiles and t-shirts?
Sure, they have factories, they have workers.
Of course. But the opportunity cost would have been insane. Every hour a Japanese factory spent sewing a $5 t-shirt was an hour they weren't building a $20,000 car or a high-end microchip.
So they effectively fired themselves from the t-shirt business.
Exactly. They specialized. They focused entirely on the high-tech, high-profit sector electronics automobiles where their advantage was greatest. And then they traded some of those profits to buy the t-shirts from Vietnam or Bangladesh, where the opportunity cost of labor was lower.
That is a really crucial distinction. It proves that you shouldn't make everything just because you can. You make what generates the most value for your time, and you trade for the rest.
And when you multiply that logic by nearly 200 countries, you get the global economy, everyone specializing in their niche to maximize overall efficiency.
Okay, so we know why the engine runs. It's the hunt for efficiency. But who built the highway? Because I assume this doesn't just happen by accident.
No, it's very much by design. This brings us to the rules of the road. The modern global economy is largely shaped by an ideology that really took over in the 80s and 90s called neoliberalism.
Neoliberalism. We hear that thrown around a lot in political debates, usually as an insult or a rallying cry, depending on who is talking. But what does it actually mean in the context of trade?
If we strip away the politics for a second, in terms of world trade architecture, neoliberalism is the belief that markets work best when governments get out of the way. It's a push for free market economics, privatizing state industries, and crucially, removing barriers to trade.
So tearing down the walls, making it easier for goods and money to up across borders.
Exactly. The theory is that if you lower tariffs and let capital flow freely, goods get cheaper and everyone gets richer. And this ideology gave birth to the massive international organizations we see today. We call it the alphabet soup of trade.
Let's run through the big ones, because these acronyms basically dictate the price of everything we buy. Let's start with the big heavyweight in Europe, the EU.
The European Union, it's fascinating because it didn't start as this massive political entity. Post-World War II, Europe was destroyed. The idea was if we trade together, we won't bomb each other. It started as a coal and steel agreement.
So peace through commerce.
Right. But it evolved into a 27-country political and economic unit. Today, the EU acts almost like a single country for economic purposes. A truck can drive from Poland to Portugal without stopping for customs. It's the ultimate example of a trade bloc.
Okay, let's hop across the ocean to South America. We have Mercosur.
Yes, the Southern Common Market. It includes Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, and Paraguay. The goal is similar to the EU, create a competitive economic bloc. By banding together, they have more negotiating power on the global stage than they would individually.
Strengths in numbers.
Yeah.
Now here's one that feels a bit different. It's always in the news when gas prices spike.
OPEC.
OPEC is a totally different beast. The EU and Mercosur are regional neighbors working together. OPEC is sector-specific. It stands for the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries.
So it's a club for oil producers. It's a cartel. Let's be clear about that. Their goal is to control the supply of oil to influence the price. They control over 80% of the world's proven oil reserves.
80%. That's immense power.
It is. Think of them as the guys with their hand on the faucet. When OPEC decides to tighten the tap and cut production, the price of gas in Ohio, London, and Tokyo goes up. It's a stark reminder that trade isn't just about friendly cooperation, it's about leverage.
And then, sitting above all of this, trying to keep everyone playing by the rules, is the WTO.
The World Trade Organization. Think of them as the Supreme Court of global trade. They negotiate deals to keep markets open, but their real power is dispute resolution.
So if a country decides to cheat.
Exactly. If country A thinks country B is unfairly taxing their products, they don't declare war, they go to court at the WTO. It's about replacing battlefield conflict with courtroom conflict.
So we have the logic with comparative advantage. We have the system with neoliberalism and these big organizations. It sounds great on paper, efficient, organized, profitable, but I feel a big but coming here.
There's always a but.
Because if the system was perfect, we wouldn't have trade wars. We wouldn't have politicians smashing sledgehammers into foreign cars and commercials.
Right. We have to talk about the friction because for all this talk of free trade, the reality is that countries are selfish. Sovereignty still matters. A president or prime minister is elected to look after their people, not the global market.
And when those interests clash, the walls go back up.
And the most common brick in that wall is the tariff.
Okay, let's double-click on tariffs. I know it's basically a tax on imports, but why use them? If we just agreed that free trade makes things cheaper, why make them more expensive on purpose?
It usually comes down to two things, protection or punishment. Let's look at protection first.
Protecting the home team.
Right. Imagine you are the government of a country that makes cars, let's say, Ford, but suddenly a foreign competitor, Volvo, starts shipping in cars that are just as good but cheaper. Everyone starts buying Volvos. Your Ford factory starts laying off workers.
Not exactly great for my re-election campaign.
Exactly. So you slap a 20% tariff on every Volvo that enters the country. Suddenly, the Volvo is more expensive than the Ford. You have artificially shifted the market to force your citizens to buy the domestic product.
So you're hurting the consumer, who now has to pay more to save the factory jobs.
That's the trade-off. But then there's the second reason, punishment or political rivalry. This is where trade becomes a weapon. We saw this vividly in the 2018 trade war between the U.S. and China.
That was intense. It felt like every week there was a new headline about billions of dollars in goods being taxed.
It was a serious tit-for-tat escalation. The U.S. put tariffs on Chinese steel and electronics. The stated goal was to punish them for intellectual property theft and trade imbalances. Then China retaliated by targeting U.S. farmers, putting tariffs on soybeans and pork.
They went straight after the political base.
Precisely. It wasn't about economics anymore. It was about geopolitical dominance. And the result? Most economists agree that both economies suffered. Prices went up for Americans. Chinese manufacturers lost orders. It showed that while tariffs are powerful weapons, they are very blunt instruments. You often hit your own foot while swinging at the other guy.
And it's not just taxes, is it? Governments can be a bit sneaky.
Oh, totally. You have quotas literally saying you can only sell 10,000 bananas this year and not one more. Or subsidies.
Just giving money to your own guys, right?
Yes. Instead of taxing the import, the government writes a check to the local factory to help them lower their prices artificially. It's like putting your own athlete on steroids so they can beat the clean athlete from the other country.
It's fascinating because it really exposes the lie of free trade. We don't really have free trade. We have managed trade with a lot of shoving and elbowing.
We do, and that constant shoving leads us to the most dangerous part of this architecture. This is the part that keeps economists up at night.
The vulnerability.
The double-edged sword. We've built this globalized economic hugfest. We're all tangled up together.
That brings to mind that analogy of the Google Doc.
Oh, I love that comparison.
Think of the global economy like a massive shared Google Doc that the whole world is working on. When it works, it's amazing. Everyone is typing at once, adding value, editing in real time. It's super efficient.
Well,
But because we are all in the exact same document, if one person deletes the wrong paragraph or uploads a virus, the whole project crashes for everyone instantly.
that is exactly what happens. We call it the ripple effect. Because supply chains are so incredibly integrated, a local problem becomes a global disaster.
Let's look at the history here. The Great Depression.
The classic example. In the 1930s, the U.S. economy collapsed, but it didn't stay in the U.S. Because the U.S. was the engine of global demand, when it stopped buying, factories in Europe and South America closed. It caused worldwide devastation.
But that was 100 years ago. Surely we've fixed the wiring since then.
You would hope so. But look at 2008, the financial crisis.
This one feels fresh for a lot of people. I remember the panic.
It was a perfect storm of interdependence. Remember, this started with the U.S. housing market. People in Florida and Nevada were taking out mortgages they couldn't afford.
Bad loans.
Terrible loans. But here is the global part. American banks didn't just hold those loans. They bundled them up into complex investments and sold them to banks in Iceland, pension funds in Germany, and investors in Japan.
So they exported the risk.
Exactly. They spread the virus before anyone even knew they were sick. So when the U.S. housing bubble burst, it wasn't just an American problem. Banks in London collapsed. The government of Iceland effectively went bankrupt. It triggered the Great Recession globally.
It's terrifying to think that a bad decision by a mortgage broker in Miami can empty a bank account in Reykjavik.
That is the reality of the architecture we've built. Efficiency connects us, but connection transmits shockwaves.
So if the Google Doc crashes, who calls IT? Who fixes it?
Well, we have safety nets. When the ship starts supping, you need someone with a really big lifeboat. That's the IMF.
The International Monetary Fund.
Think of them as the macro solution, the lender of last resort. When a country is drowning in debt or its currency is worthless like Greece a few years ago, the IMF steps in.
They write the big checks.
Huge checks, billions of dollars. But it comes with strings attached. They restructure the country's debt and force them to change their economic policies. The goal is to prevent a total collapse that would spill over to the neighbors.
So that's the top-down fix, the billionaire bailout. What about from the bottom up?
That's where things like microlending come in.
This is a concept I love. It feels so much more human.
It is. It's the opposite of the IMF. Instead of billions to a government, it's a $500 loan to a woman in Bangladesh to buy a sewing machine or a cow.
It sounds insignificant compared to the global economy.
But it's not. In the developing world, traditional banks won't touch these people. They have no collateral. Microlending connects these grassroots economies to the global system. It empowers people, especially women, to enter the market.
It's building resilience from the ground up, rather than just patching holes from the top down.
Exactly. If the IMF is the emergency surgery, microlending is the daily vitamins. You need both to have a healthy body.
We have covered a massive amount of ground today. Let's try to pull this all together.
Sure. We start with the engine. Trade isn't an accident. It's driven by complementarity resource mismatches and comparative advantage, the mathematical logic of specialization.
Then we looked at the structure. Neoliberalism paved the highway, creating giants like the EU, OPEC, and the WTO to manage the traffic.
But we saw that road rage is real. Tariffs, quotas, and subsidies are the weapons countries use to protect themselves, even if it hurts the overall efficiency.
And finally, the risk. We are so connected that a crisis in one place instantly becomes a crisis everywhere. We traded isolation for contagion.
Which is why we need those safety nets like the IMF to keep the whole thing from collapsing.
It really changes how you look at that phone in your pocket, doesn't it? It's not just a gadget. It's a miracle of cooperation and a terrifying example of interdependence.
The modern world is defined by these deep, unavoidable spatial connections. Whether efficient or volatile, we are locked in together.
So here is the big question I want to leave everyone with today.
If we look at the big picture, we have spent the last 50 years building a system designed for maximum speed and lowest cost, just-in-time delivery, zero inventory, cheapest labor.
Right.
But as we saw with the financial crisis, and more recently with supply chain breakdowns, efficiency creates fragility. If one link snaps, the chain breaks.
So the question is,
In a world that is getting more volatile, have we built a system that is too efficient for its own good? Should we be sacrificing some of that cheap speed to build a little more resilience?
are we trading safety for a cheaper t-shirt? That is a thought that will definitely keep me up tonight.
It's the defining economic debate of the next 20 years.
Well, thank you for listening to this deep dive into the architecture of world trade. Stay curious, stay connected, and we'll catch you on the next one.